wasn't going to do another one this week, but it's the day after Thanksgiving today, and my kids are sleeping, and we're having a lazy day, and I know that this next week at work is going to be insanely crazy busy and nuts, so I'm not going to be able to film this coming week, so I thought I'd throw you another one. And then the next time you see me, I'll have my new background as well. But here's one for you. Let's get started. It was dusk, and my husband was out of town, and I had just put my 3-year-old to bed and stepped onto the patio for a smoke. There was a giant field behind my house. Montana is known for its wide open spaces. I had never heard of a Skinwalker before, not even from the locals at all. But as I relaxed in my canvas camp chair, I caught something out of the corner of my eye and was instantly alert, thinking it was a wolf or a big cat or something. It was a big thing. I snapped my head to look at it, and my brain could not process what I was seeing. It was flat-backed and on all fours. Its head stuck straight up. It was pale white, hairless, and it moved like a giant slow-motion spider. It wasn't coming for me, though. It didn't see me, as far as I know, but I saw it, and every cell in my body went shh. I swear to you, a primal instinct overtook me, and I never moved so quickly and quietly back inside the perceived safety of my house before in my entire life. Never have I been so terror-stricken before or since that night. I can't explain why. It wasn't coming after me at all. This was in 2004. Since then, I've heard of them and seen what people post on the internet, and I believe completely. Because I've seen a Skinwalker, and I never want to see one again. Terrifying. And in many other Skinwalker stories that I have seen and even narrated for you guys, that description sounds consistent. So whenever you have consistency, I think it lends itself to accuracy, right? And then that leans towards honesty, believability, right? Spooky. Next, I have a few stories here, including this one that, again, is not from Reddit, is in fact from Monsters Among Us, which is a podcast about real paranormal experiences. And I'm really loving the stories that I'm finding off of there. So, here we go. On his way to get married, a military man and his best man set off on an 800-mile road trip from Camp Lejeune in North Carolina to Lafayette, Indiana. It was 1 a.m. on a cold January night in 2014, and the man tells Monsters Among Us the weather was bad and temperatures were in the negative double digits. As the pair closed in on Indianapolis, they discovered that they had no money to pay for gas to refuel the car, and they were about to run out. Growing up in the trucking industry with my dad, I decided to stop at a truck stop, the man explained. But because the main interstates were shut down due to the weather, they had to get off the highway and search for a truck stop along the back gas enough to get back to Indianapolis, at which time they'd go to the bank, take out cash, and pay back the loan. Inside, they found a tidy diner, occupied by a waitress, cook, and a lone bus driver. I went inside, talked to this driver, and he bought us a cup of coffee. We sat there and talked for about 30 minutes about what was going on and where we were headed, and he gave us $20 for gas. I went outside, pumped our gas, came back in and told him, "Hey, I really appreciate it. I'll be back." Making good on his word, the man got cash from the bank upon arriving in Indianapolis and returned to the diner to pay back the loan. When we arrived, about 10 o'clock in the morning, it's boarded up. It looked like it had been abandoned for years and the truck's gone. But we had just been there. They pulled in anyway and found a police officer parked in the lot. They explained what happened just hours before, to which the cop chuckled and replied, "Oh, you met the ghost of 3. So, 2 military members converse, had a cup of coffee with, interacted with 3 people at a diner that had a fuel pump. I got $20 worth of gas," says the man. "And when I came back, it had been boarded up for, if I remember correctly, the cop said it had been boarded up for the last 25 years. That is creepy and awesome. Yeah. That's neat. I love stories like that, where there's just no other explanation. I mean, what else could have happened, right? And clearly this is something that a lot of people had run into because the cop knew about it, right? That's awesome. Good story. Kip, a caller from New York State, talks of an old home that he and his wife purchased. Upon moving in, his wife invited her sister and newborn baby to come for a visit. They stayed in the downstairs bedroom and my wife was sleeping in an upstairs bedroom. Kip explains on Monsters Among Us and says the first night their guests stayed, his wife overheard her sister talking to someone in the middle of the night. The next morning, Kip's wife asked who she'd been talking to, and her sister replied, "I woke up in the middle of the night and there was an old lady standing over my baby and I had to tell her to get away." According to Kip, there were more unexplained incidents in the house, including mysteriously moving lamps and a creepy occurrence with a fire alarm that went off while his wife was outside working in their garden. She immediately runs back into the house, figures out that it's the smoke alarm in that same downstairs bedroom going off. When she opened the door, she said for a split second, all she could see in the room was this white fog. Within moments, however, the white fog disappeared and the alarm shut off. Convinced the house was haunted, Kip's wife reached out to a neighbor to learn more about the property and discovered that the previous owner was a 90-year-old woman who tragically died in a house fire. Needless to say, we fixed up the house and got out of there as fast as we could and moved someplace else. That's crazy. I've been moving real fast too. was around 6 or 7, I lived in a townhouse with my mom and dad up until my mom passed away less than a couple months later. And she was pouring me some milk in the kitchen like every other night, and I was winding down from that day at school. There was nothing scary about this night, and I was just waiting for my mom to pour the milk and looking out into the living room in the front of me, just looking at things and waiting. However, on one of my head swivels from looking around, my dad had appeared in front of a closet door in our living room. It didn't scare me at first because I just assumed it was my dad, but looking back, there was no noise ever made. Our doors and floors creaked, and with how quiet it was, we would have heard anyone moving around. What was so scary about it was my dad was just standing there and staring at us from across the room. I mean, it wasn't scary at first, since I was still under the impression that this was my dad, but the longer he kept standing there and staring at me, the scarier it got. He didn't move an inch. He didn't blink, and the longer I kept looking at him, I noticed his eyes were too small. They were wide open, but small enough to where it looked wrong. I remember I started to blink and rub my eyes because I thought maybe I was just seeing things. But it just kept standing there for a good minute longer until after a blink, and it just disappeared. No noise at all. There was no way, considering it disappeared in a blink, for it to have humanly moved that fast without making some kind of sound. The only way it could have disappeared as fast as it did was if it slammed the door shut behind it. I remember how terrified I was at that point, and looking to my mom to see if she saw it too, but she didn't say anything, so I assumed I just hallucinated it for years. That was until a few years ago. I was telling my dad about that night, and he told me my mom had also seen it. But due to her mental health problems, and me not saying anything to her or him about it, he dismissed it as a hallucination. Nothing quite like that has ever happened to me again, but that experience was the reason for years I couldn't sleep without a light on. Before that day, I was not afraid of the dark. I didn't believe in ghosts. I didn't even understand people could actually die at that point. I was not really exposed to religion. But every night, after that incident, until we moved, I was petrified to even sleep in my room. That is super freaky. Oh my goodness, it gives me the tinglies in a not good way. Spooky. Okay. Jacqueline from Oklahoma says that while her memories have faded over the years, she recalls having an imaginary friend when she was young. Her grandparents, Granny Junie and Pa Hank, lived in a small home with a quiet backyard. Jacqueline recalls visiting them as a child. I have very good memories of my Pa Hank, Jacqueline says on the podcast Monsters Among Us. He would sit under the tree with me and tell me stories. These stories were often about his life and memories of prohibition, she says. He was actually a very interesting character. The only problem, her grandfather died in 1981, and Jacqueline was born was getting stories from a ghost, she says, adding that the rest of her family knew of his presence in the house. My Granny Junie would never stay in the house on the anniversary of his death, she says. He did die in the house. Jacqueline also recalls hearing Pa Hank get up in the middle of the night when she was staying at the house. It never occurred to me that these were memories of an entity, she said. In hindsight, Jacqueline says that even though her childhood imaginary friend was actually her dead grandfather, it casts a different light because it was a relative and not a stranger. It never felt like ghosts. It felt like talking to my Pa Hank. I think that's pretty sweet. I mean, it's spooky, true, but also, he wasn't there to harm you, just to look after you and tell you stories. And that's kind of sweet. A caller named Joe tells of moving to Georgia from California in the late 1990s. Soon after, he says his brother followed him to the Peach Estate and rented an old house built in the 1800s. It looked nice from the outside. It did not feel good on the inside, Joe says during the podcast. According to Joe, things seemed off from the moment he helped his brother move into the home. I walked into the house and I went, oh man. The hair stood up on the back of my neck and I just felt ill at ease, like this place isn't cool at all, he says. Moments later, while carrying items into the bedroom, Joe says he heard whispering. A heated whispering, almost like an argument between two people that seemed to be hovering in the top of the ceiling area of the room, he says. Joe ran out of the room and asked his brother if he'd felt that something was off about the house too. His brother had picked up on the vibe, but assured Joe that things would be all right. As long as you're good, Joe says he told his brother. I'm not good, and I can't help you. I'm going home, and I probably won't come back here. And sure enough, Joe's brother began experiencing unusual occurrences in the house. The most alarming, however, was when Joe said his young niece was found wandering alone on a busy road with her hand up in the air. Police and other agencies were called to investigate the incident, and when asked, his brother's 4-year-old explained that she'd gone for a stroll with the old lady that lives there. She just wanted to go for a walk, so we went for a walk. Given that the front door was too heavy for a 4-year-old to open by herself, no one could understand how she was able to leave the house. According to Joe, his niece said the old lady opened the door, and then we petted the dog for a little bit, and then went for a walk. She was so genuine and honest at 4 years old that he couldn't call her a liar. Joe says, soon after his brother moved and never returned. That's unnerving. I wonder where that ghost would have led that little girl if no one had saw her and intervened. That's really unnerving as a mother. Ick. This next one is about the Lizzie Borden house. We all know who Lizzie Borden is. I'm sure you've heard the rhyme. Okay. On August 4th, 1892, Andrew and his wife, Abby Borden, were found brutally murdered in their Fall River, Massachusetts home. Though murder wasn't uncommon in the late 1800s, the fact that they were bludgeoned to death with an axe, and the main suspect was their 32-year-old daughter, Lizzie Borden, certainly was. The crime and the trial that followed made headlines around the world. Lizzie was ultimately acquitted of murder, but she remains forever linked to the heinous killings, as does the home where the crime was committed. Now a bed and breakfast and museum, the Borden home attracts history buffs and thrill seekers who come to see for themselves if the rumors that the house is haunted are indeed true. When I started working here, it was more of the history. I really didn't care about the paranormal. Suzanne St. John, a realtor and tour guide at the Lizzie Borden house at tellstoday.com. However, all that changed after St. John says she experienced a few unusual happenings of her own. Guests tell us that they hear laughing and playing in the middle of the night, and then things get moved around, she says. And St. John has experienced a few unusual things herself, saying that once she discovered toys scattered across a room that no one had been in. St. John also talks of a picture that fell over and slid 2 feet across the floor without any plausible explanation, as well as a closet door that opened on its own volition. On the eve of the anniversary of Andrew and Abby's murder, St. John says that she and 2 other tour guides at the house felt a sudden sharp, piercing pain in their left eyes. The same location of Andrew Borden's fatal injuries. Perhaps the most unsettling, however, is the story St. John tells of a tour guide at the Lizzie Borden house who asked her group to silence their cell phones before beginning the tour. Moments later, a guest's cell phone rang. She looked up and said, "It's my mom." The tour guide asked if she wanted to leave and take the call, to which the woman replied, "She died 2 years ago." I just don't even know about making that place a bed and breakfast, though. I mean, the sight of a really, really disturbing, tragic, disgusting murder, I don't know. Not real classy, I don't think. Just my opinion. I wouldn't be staying there. This is a glitch in the Matrix. My favorite. I have experienced a few glitches, but this by far is the most dramatic. I did some growing up outside of Phoenix, in a small town 2 hours south. I loathed living there, and between that and my girlfriend leaving, I just had it too much, and I decided to literally pick up and go. This was in 2002. Everything I owned was thrown into garbage bags and tossed into the back of my truck. I emptied my whole apartment and packed within a few hours. By 9 p.m., I was on the road to Phoenix. The drive, if one isn't speeding, is about 2.5 hours, and it's a trip I had made so often I could practically close my eyes and make it. It's a boring drive up and out of the valley the town is in, down the other side of the mountain, and finally coasting 2 hours one way through flat, desolate desert. But it got weird, real damn fast. I gassed up, got through town real quick, and started up the mountain pass. I was real 19 and real excited. Once you got up the mountain, it was kind of like a hello to all of the behind you. I sailed down the mountain and proceeded on to Act 2, which was the long, boring part. I had a tape player in my old truck, and I was maxing out the volume on the Ramones tape and keeping watch of the green highway signs that told you how many miles the towns in front and behind are. That was the way I always battled highway hypnosis. The first sign read something like Phoenix, 170 miles. Another small chunk of time had passed into the night before I saw another sign, Phoenix, 155 miles. When my high beams revealed the next one, it was a little sooner. Phoenix, 143 miles. But I swear, the next sign that rendered out of the dark desert was the town I'm from. For the purpose of this story, we'll call it Town X. So the sign said, Town X, 30 miles. I couldn't understand why it would show the town behind me on a 2-lane, one-way highway. The next sign read, Town X, 25 miles. WTF. When the next sign came up and said Town X, 15 miles, I didn't hesitate. I just had a really, really bad feeling, so I yanked my steering wheel left. I drove over the shoulder and into pure desert median. The jostling shook me until I was able to complete my giant U-turn, landing on the other 2 lanes and hauling ass. 2 hours later, I was in Phoenix. Doesn't make any sense. Only thing I can think of is maybe I turned off the highway and drove around onto the other lanes. But anyone who has driven through the desert will tell you just how impossible it is to complete that without noticing. It seems your town was not ready to let you go, even if you were ready to let it go. That's pretty glitchy. Here is your ASMR sound smoothie. Enjoy, my little scaries. My daughter is artistically